We need to talk.
You've done something wrong.
Okay.
I'm toast.
Now, I'm not upset.
I'm upset.
I'm just kind of surprised.
I'm a ticking time bomb of volcanic fury.
Because you forgot about yesterday?
Because you are a moron of epic proportions.
Yesterday.
I'm toast.
Yesterday was the 15th anniversary of our first official date.
Oh, that's right, I remember.
I have no memory of that.
Do I need to get some flowers or something?
No.
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
No.
Are you mad?
No.
Yes.
You'll remember next year.
I will.
I won't.
All right, relationship translators. So sometimes we need those in communication. We're going to talk about that today. But first, let me just say hi. Really glad you're here. My name is Jeff, for those I haven't gotten to know yet. And whether you've been here a long time or this is your first time to come to Chase Oaks, we're really glad you're on this journey with us. And you're wondering if you're welcome around here. The answer is yes. It's a come as you are church. And also want to welcome those not only at our Legacy campus, but our other campuses too. So everybody online right now, wherever you are, around the country, around the world, as well as our physical campuses like Woodbridge and NS Peñol and Sloan Creek. Today, we are continuing this series called Wayfinder, which is about looking to God's Word, looking to the Bible, to help us find His wisdom, to help us navigate the key relationships in our life, and to help us go and help make all of them significantly better. And today, we're talking about how to take relationships deeper. We're talking about what it takes to go deep, and that's why I have this football here. It's kind of the Chase Oaks football. Anybody else excited about this weekend, right? Kicking off the college season, and then next week, the NFL season. Somebody deflated my ball a little bit from Friday night, so I think Tom Brady got backstage or something. I don't know, but it feels really good. I can see why they do that. I'm getting off track though. So with being football season, I mean, I don't know how it started off for your team. Hopefully it went well. So far, so good on my end. I'm an Alabama fan, and whatever you are, that's great, right? And when you jump into the season, you're all excited and you watch the game. If you're really into your team, you're into every play. And every play is important. But there are some that are more exciting than others. And to me, the most exciting is the deep pass. You know, it's when somebody just airs it out and then, oh, what's going to happen? And then, you never know what's going to happen, right? Of course, it's awesome when you get the big reception. And so to get us in that mode, to get us in that feel, let's watch some of these on the screen.
State coming in, averaging just 2.6 yards a carry. But Manning will throw, going deep for Hart and makes the grab. Penny Hart, touchdown, Georgia State.
Down and 11. The Aggies need the 35-yard line. Rogers airs it out, has a man. It is tipped, then it's caught in the end zone. Isaiah Lottie.
That is the map.
Shemenek steps into this deep throw, looking down the middle of the field, a leaping try, and a touchdown, Texas Tech.
They bring a motion man and fake it to him. The work he sets up. Felton Davis end zone, diving catch.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Couldn't we just watch that one all day, right? You want to watch it again? No? Okay, we won't. But right, whoever you're pulling for, the deep ball and the deep, reception is always exciting. Even when we were little kids, playing in the backyard, it's like, oh, I'm going to go deep. All right, you go deep. You're never going to throw it that far. But it was always fun to try. And today we're talking about how to take our relationships deeper because all of us are created for that. We are created not just for shallow connection, not just for casual friendships. That's great, nothing wrong with those. But we're also, created to have deep connection, deep relationships. People who aren't just friends, but you might call them comrades. People who are with you and for you in life in a really deep way, where you know them in a deep way and you're known by them. And that kind of connection is really rare in our culture. And there's sociologists will give a lot of reasons for why that is. But they will also say that we live in a culture where we have a lot of shallow connection, a lot of friends, but not much deep connection. And so today we want to look at God's word to say, how can we take our significant relationships deeper? And it would really help if you would think of a relationship that you would love to be deeper as we go through this message and look at what God says about it. So it might be a friend, it might be a dating relationship or marriage, it might be a parent-child relationship, it might be a group of people that you hang with, or a small group like a life group that you would love to go deeper and to say, okay, how can we take this deeper? And today we're talking about how to throw. We're talking about communication, but how to throw and how to catch, how to receive. And we're going back to basics, really, of how depth works and how it functions. We're going back to the basics for a reason, because that's what actually makes it happen. It's kind of like in 1961, the third greatest football coach in history, Vince Lombardi, of the Green Bay Packers. And do you have to guess who I would think the first two greatest coaches in history are? Yeah, Bear Bryant, Nick Saban. We'd all say that, right? Maybe not, but okay. But let's just agree that Vince Lombardi was cool, okay? So Vince Lombardi it was 1961 season, the very beginning of that season, which really means not the games yet. He's starting spring camp, so they're just back from break for the first time, first meeting with this team. They've just come off a really good season. They went to the NFC Championship, and they got way ahead in that game. Had a big lead going into the fourth quarter, and then lost to the Philadelphia Eagles at the NFC Championship game in a really heartbreaking way. So now they're all back. And you have these professional athletes who are experts, right, at their position. I mean, they're expert football players. They're pros. So Vince Lombardi comes out, first minute of camp, with a football in his hand, and he gave the famous quote. He held the football up, and he said, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And then he explained to them, we're going back to the basics. We're going to go back and we're going to learn the right way to tackle. We're going to learn the basics of how to block. We're going to learn the basics of how to catch, how to throw, how to run. We're going back to the basics. And if you think you know all this already, if you think you've got it down, well, let me remind you, we're not the champions. If we had it down, we would be. And so we're going back to the basics. And that's kind of what we're doing, is we're going back to the basics. My goal is not to tell us some new crazy thing about relationships that we've never heard before. It's like, wow, that guy from Alabama, I didn't think he was very smart, but he is. Like, it's amazing. We're not doing that. We're going back to the basics of saying, okay, what does it mean? We're going to do a throwing lesson and a receiving lesson. And we're going to do that by looking at Jesus, who, among other things, was an amazing relator. You know, we know Jesus was an incredible teacher and miracle worker and compassionate humanitarian, and he's an incredible leader. And so you can look at his life as a model for a whole lot of things. And I think that's one of the reasons Jesus came here and lived among us. You know, he's God who took on human flesh, lived among us for a few years, 35 years, to show us not only how to do Christian, just like religious things, but also how to do things like relate to each other and how to build deep connection and build deep relationships, because he had that. He didn't go deep with everybody. He was kind to everybody. He was authentic with everybody, but he went deep with a few. So for him, he had his disciples, but even among them, you see, it was Peter, James, and John were like his crew. And then in addition to that, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And really, those 6 people were like his posse, like his deep relationships. And we see we learn a lot about how to go deep and make our relationships deeper by looking at Jesus. So that's what we're going to do. So first, we're going to start with a throwing lesson, okay? We're going to talk about how to throw the deep ball. And since we're talking about communication, you might think, we're going to talk about how to talk, how to, put words out there. And we kind of are, but kind of not. We're not just talking about throwing words out. I mean, the truth is, we're all good at that. We use lots of words. The average person uses about 16,000 words a day. So we're not, we do fine on spraying words out there. In fact, it used to be said that, it's still said a lot. I've heard it for decades. that girls talk like 3 times more than guys. Have you heard that? Like girls use like 20,000 words a day and guys use like 7,000 words a day. I remember hearing that. And then it's fun to make fun of girls for talking a lot and guys for not talking so much. For people like me who communicate, you can really, use that for humor. But sometimes truth gets in the way of a good story. And this is one of those. It's actually not true. They've traced it back to some marriage book where somebody just made it up. And it's just been passed down. But actually the research has shown that guys and girls talk about the same. Girls maybe a few hundred words a day more, but that's all. About 16,000 words a day. We just talk about different things in different contexts, but we all spray out a lot of words. So that's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is how to use those words in a way that are self-disclosing. It's about being vulnerable. Throwing the deep ball is about allowing ourselves, taking the risk to be known in a deep way. And that's not easy to do, because that's pretty scary, throwing the deep ball when you throw that out there. And again, a lot of reasons for sociologists will say that we're just not so good at doing that. We live in a world that's increasingly about image management, managing our image, social media and so on, being impressive, but that's different than being known. And so how can we communicate in a way where we can actually be known? And Jesus is really amazing here when you look at his when you look at his significant relationships. And there's multiple examples I could have gone to, but the most striking to me that I always think about when I think about this in my own relationships is toward the end of his life, where he's with his 12 disciples. At the very end, it's called the Last Supper. That evening, he's doing the meal. Later that evening, he knows he's going to be arrested. He's going to be beaten. The next day, he's going to be crucified and die on the cross for the sins of the world. We can't even imagine how much dread he would have had, not only just being crucified physically, which was a terrible, torturous way to die. The Romans made it up to make it the worst way to die, and it was a terrible way to die, but I don't think that's why he was dreading it. He was dreading it because of the spiritual part of that in ways we can't even understand. Because Jesus, who is God, sinless, is now taking on the sins of the world, your sin and mine, so that he can take the penalty that we deserve. And there's a part in there, as he's being crucified, as he's taking on the sins of the world, where there's this split in the Trinity. Trinity meaning God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, where the Son of God, Jesus, looks at God the Father, looks up and says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And there's some kind of division that we don't even understand in the Trinity. So we can't even understand what he was anticipating. It was just really, really tough. And how's he going to go through that? And you see how he goes through that. In the Last Supper, as he interacts with his 12 disciples. And I encourage you this week, just read it. It's toward the end of the book of John. John gives 3 or 4 chapters to it, and you learn a lot about how to share in a vulnerable way. But then he leaves that upper room, and he goes out with his 11 disciples, because Judas has already gone to betray him. He goes with his 11 disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane. And he knows what's going to happen at the garden. That's where he's going to be arrested. And so he's got all this dread and all this stuff. And how's he going to deal with that with his closest friends? And here's what happens. They went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. So most of the disciples, he's like saying, guys, I'm going to pray. I'm going to spend some time with God because I need to. And I need you to be with me. I need you to pray for me. I need you to hang with me. But then he took Peter, James, and John. Those were the closest to him, along with him, deeper into the garden. And he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, he said to them. Stay here and keep watch. Meaning, I need you to be with me because, well, he was deeply distressed and troubled. And notice, he didn't hide that. He didn't act like he's fine. He didn't act like he was okay, because he wasn't okay. He was deeply distressed and he was deeply troubled, and he didn't hide it. In fact, notice what he says to them. He says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. He's not saying, guys, you know what? I'm going to be fine. I mean, yeah, I'm human, but I'm also divine. I'm God. I mean, come on, I'm God. I'm fine. Or God the Father is going to strengthen me, and it's all right. You don't have to worry about me. He doesn't say that. He looks at those closest to him and he says, I am so overwhelmed with sorrow and dread. I don't even want to live anymore. I don't think I can make it. I mean, this is the Son of God who shares with his closest friends at that depth. And then he prays. And in that prayer, that's when he says, if you've heard the story, where he says, my God, where he says, God, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. I'm here to do your will. It's not my will. I'm not on earth to do my will, but your will. And if this is the only way to save the world from sin, then I'm in. But if there's any other way, and he's crying and he's weeping and it's this intense time of prayer. And the disciples are right there watching it and hearing it, which is why we have it in our Bible. He doesn't hide it. And then when he finishes praying, he goes over to his three friends that have been there with him and for him in a deep way, praying, right? And what are they doing? They're asleep. They fall asleep. And it's interesting to me how he handles that too, because he's so kind. He says, guys, I know you wanted to hang with me when I needed you most. I know the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak and you're tired. I get it. But at the same time, he's like, really? You couldn't hang with me for 1 hour? The hour that I needed you the most? It's another tender moment because he's not hiding his disappointment. He's not hiding his hurt. He's not being mean. He's just saying, really? And when I go through that story and think about how I relate, it's challenging to me. No wonder he had such deep connection. And I don't think it's easy. Maybe it is for some of you, but I think for most of us, it is not easy to relate at that level of depth and authenticity. And so if you're like me and you think, yeah, I need to learn how to go deeper, I need to learn how to be more authentic, to be known at a deeper level, then we're going to learn how to throw. And hopefully somebody taught you how to throw a football at some point. If not, email me. I'll get somebody to come help you throw a football. But we're talking about communication. And this is really helpful to me. Say, how do we throw a deep ball? And it's really down here. But these are different levels of communication. Somebody shared this with me years ago. And I'm committed over this last week and over these next few weeks to practicing this in some of my relationships. And I've already been doing it. So it starts with cliche. That's at the most shallow area of communication, and then all the way down to feelings and needs. So let me play with this a little bit. So let's say you see somebody after work. If you're married, maybe you come home and you're talking to each other after work, or you're with a friend or something. If you're single or whatever, you're just talking to somebody, right? Get in that scenario and the question is, man, how was work today? And cliche is, hey, how was work today? It's like, hey, living the dream, or, well, it's a Monday, or whatever, right? It's just sort of a cliche. If it went any better, they'd have to fire me, or whatever. So it's some kind of cliche. Or even just something as simple as, it's okay, been better. And then fact. Okay, fact is more self-disclosing because there you just share the facts of the day. How was your day? Well, I started out and we had, met with these people and then I had lunch with so-and-so and we talked about this and then sat through this long sales presentation and I think we're going to go with them, but, it was about twice as long as it should be. And then you just talk about whatever it is, right? You talk through your day and that's facts. And then you get down to opinions. Now, opinions are self-disclosing because you're revealing your thoughts about things. Your thoughts about your day, your thoughts about the other person's day, your thoughts about what's going on in the world, whatever. You're sharing opinions and thoughts. And that is self-disclosing, but what we're talking about is getting down below the waterline of our life into feelings and needs. And that gets down to what happened in my day or what's happening in this world, what's happening in my life is impacting me at a deeper level below the waterline. My feelings, like, let's say I went through something that day and it's like, hey, this was really exciting to me today. Or this was really discouraging to me. Or this made me feel sad. Or I'm really struggling with this. Or I had a meeting with my boss and now I have a lot of self-doubt about me or my career or whatever. That gets down to something much. And then needs is, man, this is what I need from you. Which is a vulnerable thing to do. And that's what Jesus was doing. His feelings, I am so overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. I need you to be with me. I need you to just hang with me. I need you right now. That's deep. Now, for most of us, it's way easier to live up here than it is down here. At least it is for me. And so for those of us who need some practice here, we're going to talk about, okay, let's transit, because there's some reasons it's easy to stay up here. One of those reasons is just laziness. It's just a lot easier to hang up here. It's difficult, it's work to do this, to talk and listen at this level. And therefore, in our relationships, often when you're starting or building a significant friendship or dating relationship, or let's say you get married or whatever, or you get in a group, often at the beginning, people are pretty good about doing this because you're building connection. And you're sharing things, and people are like, oh man, I can relate to that. And you're building this relationship, and you're connecting with each other at a deep level. But a long-term relationship, whether it's marriage or long-term friendship or something, it's easy then to take that for granted and get lazy and begin just to kind of live up here and lose that connection. And you can see that. In fact, I'm going to give you an assignment this week. Just go out to eat this week at a restaurant that's, especially one that's kind of crowded, and people watch a little bit. You like to people watch? Okay, yeah, some of you like football, some of you like to people watch, all right? So go people watch. And look for couples, okay? And it's pretty easy to, unfortunately, to spot the dating couples. Because a dating couple is just different, right? Because they're actually looking at each other. Like they have eye contact, and they're leaning in. Maybe they're even holding hands or something. And you can see they're just listening to every word, and it's like they have little hearts in their eyes, you know, and as they're looking, and it's just like, oh, he's so amazing, she's so incredible, and they're sharing at a deep, like sharing their thoughts, but also their feelings, and you're like, wow, I didn't know, anybody thought that like just like I do, and feel like I feel that way too, and you get me in a way I just never thought anybody could get me, and they go on for hours like that, and the people in the restaurant are like shutting off the lights and on and all that, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought, in 5 hours feels like 5 minutes to them. And then look around and see other couples. Maybe those who've been together a long time, been married a long time, and they're easy to spot too, because they're not doing all that. And the eye contact and all, it's just not really happening. And they're talking every now and then. I mean, they're quiet a lot, kind of looking around, but then they say things like, so, how's your steak? It's good. How's your salmon? Well, a little fishy, but it's okay. And quiet, And if you talk to Emily, oh, yeah, I got a text. She needs more money. Yeah. All right, well, you ready? Right, and then, that's it, right? And you go. And what's interesting to me about that is that couple used to be that other couple. And they worked really hard to build depth, and they were connecting in a deep way and all. It's just easy to take that for granted, and I know that. In fact, this week, personally, I know that. This week, Christy and I were talking about that. She didn't know I was going to be talking about this in this series. I just came home from work, and it was on a Wednesday. And for me, Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm in meetings all day, and I get kind of peopled out. Some of you just get energized the more people you're around, and I love people, and it does give energy until it just doesn't. And I don't want to talk to anybody, and I don't want to, So I was home just on my computer, and she's wanted to talk, and she's like, when you come home from work, you just don't talk about anything significant, and because I was up here, and honestly, and as she said, I was like, yeah, you're right, because she was asking me about my day, and I didn't even want to go here. To fact, and he's like, really? I got to talk through. I met with so-and-so, and then I met with somebody else, and then I met with somebody, like, really, I've got to go through. That's what was going on, and she's like, like at some point, like you get tired and stuff, but when are we going to talk about what's going on in our life, And we do have times set aside. We have a date night. We eat lunch on Fridays and all that helps with this. But I realize really not talking enough at this level. And so for me, I'm practicing this. I started Friday at lunch, just trying to talk down here about feelings and needs and asking her questions at that level and me sharing at that level. And you know what? It was like the best Friday lunch we've had in a long time because we didn't just stay up here, and somebody's got to do that, right? Somebody's got to say, you know what? I'm not just going to do this. We're going to go deeper here. And really, let me just spell it out a little bit more what I'm talking about. I'm talking about sharing hurts, revealing true feelings, confessing failures, acknowledging weakness, expressing doubts, asking for help in prayer. That's what I mean at that lower level. And it's not easy to do that, especially if you're the first one to do it in a relationship, because you don't know how the other person's going to respond. And that's really the other part of, another reason is laziness, but another reason is fear. You know, it's scary to throw the long ball because you don't know what's going to happen. It could be intercepted. It could just fall flat. You share something really deep, and somebody's like, yeah, whatever. You know what? I mean, just, you don't know how somebody's going to, they can make fun of you. They can ridicule you. You're like, really? You think that? You feel that? You just don't know. Even for me, I don't worry about that so much, but I don't like being the needy person in a relationship. I like being the needed person, just not the needy person. And I don't want to be the person that, you know, just always shares all this negative stuff. And then like every time, you know, I come around, people are like, oh no, let's act like we're not here, you know, or whatever. It's like, oh, here we go. I just have this fear of doing that. And so it's easy for me to stay up here. So I was at lunch this week with a good friend of mine. His name is Jack Warren. Anybody ever heard of him? He's our executive pastor, and he's awesome. We've been friends for like 35 years. Before we were ever on staff here, before we lived in Texas, we were in Alabama, we knew each other. I mean, we go way back. We've been through everything pretty much together, ups and downs and sideways and everything. So he knows what's going on in my life, and one of the things going on in my life is our oldest son, Colin, and his wife, Kinsey, are moving from here to Denver. They've been married for 2 years. They've been here. They've been involved in our church. Many of you know them. They're an amazing young couple, and it's just been awesome having them here. But they're moving to Denver, and it's the right thing to do. We're excited for them, and it's all the right reasons, and we're proud of them, and it's all good, but it's also really sad. So Jack is with me, and we're eating lunch. And he's like, hey, how's it going with, you know, Colin and Kinsey moving to Denver? What's going on with you in this? And so I start that cliche. Well, you know, it's okay. God's with us, and then share facts about the move and how we're trying to squeeze in time with each other before the move. But he's a good enough friend to say, hey, you know, that's really not what I'm asking. And he went down here. He said, I'm asking, how are you doing with the fact that they're moving away? How are you feeling? Because if I were you, I'd be sad. I mean, I know you're excited, but I'd also be sad. And it made me go there because I just don't do sad very well. And I told him that. I said, well, Jack, you've known me long enough to know I don't do sad well, so I need you to keep asking me that question so I can process grief, because otherwise I won't go there, right? But he brought it out in me. I mean, he's provided a safe context, but then that connection, because we were sharing at that level. I mean, he's got things he's going through too, right? And when people share a deep love, you're like, oh, I can relate to that. And then it just goes deep. But somebody's got to take the scary step to be self-disclosing in a relationship if you want it to go deep. So again, you're thinking about a relationship that you want to go deeper. Let's say it's a friendship or a small group you're in, a life group you're in, something like that. And let's say it's shallow, and you know, you think, oh man, this is just not even worth it, just a shallow friendship, or it's a shallow small group. We don't really talk about anything deep. Well, if that's where you're at and you're in that relationship, somebody's got to break the ice of vulnerability so that it can go deep, right? Somebody's got to be willing to take that first step. And if you're in that relationship, or if you're in that group, and I've shared this tip before, but if you're in that, who should be the one to break the ice? If you're in that relationship, if you're in that small group, who should be the one to break the ice? Tell me. Yeah, you're saying you, which sounds right, but it's not. I've shared this before. Let's talk somebody else into doing it because it's too risky, and just see how it goes. And then if it falls flat, be like, well, it stinks for you. But if it goes well, right, then share. Nah, I'm kidding. You said the right answer. No, you got to be, because all you're risking, right, is a shallow relationship. All right, so that's throwing and self-disclosing, but let's talk about catching a little bit. Do a receiving lesson, because it's great, it's exciting, right, to throw the deep ball, to be self-disclosing, but it's only exciting if somebody is on the receiving end as well. So how do we receive? And really here we're talking about listening. And we're talking about listening in a very active way that draws people out. And Jesus is, of course, a great example of that. In fact, he's amazing to me, because if anybody that I would think doesn't really need to listen, it would be Jesus, because he's God and he already knew everything, right? So if you're in a conversation with Jesus, let's say 2,000 years ago, one of his disciples, and you start going on and on about something, I mean, if I were him and I'm God, I already knew everything you're thinking and everything you're feeling, but you know what, can we just cut this? I know exactly, like I already know all this. So we don't really need to talk about this. You know, let's just, but he didn't do that. He drew people out. because he wanted to connect. Even when he taught, he didn't teach, like he wasn't a lecturer as much as he was a dialogue kind of person. He wasn't monologue, he was dialogue. And if anybody had a reason to be all monologue, be like, you know what, we're not doing a group discussion because I'm God and I know everything, so just be quiet and listen. But he didn't do that because he wanted to connect. Same way when he healed people. I mean, when you read about his healings, he didn't just go around healing everybody, fixing everybody. I mean, I think I would be like, oh, okay, here it is in this room. Okay, boom, 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 you're all done. He didn't do that. He moved toward people and interacted with people, and he would connect. He would hear their story, and sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Like he'd meet a blind person or a person been paralyzed by birth, and he would ask him like, so what do you want me to do for you? And I always read that and think, well, I'm blind. So how about, making me see? Or, I've been paralyzed and be kind of nice if I wasn't paralyzed. So why did he even do that? Because he didn't just want to fix people. He was connecting people. He was connecting to people. He's moving into their hurt, moving into their pain, moving into their situation. When you look at his long conversations that we have, and we have some, like him and the woman at the well is another story. If you don't know what that is, Google it. But it's a great example of him just asking questions in a way that drew people out deeper and deeper and deeper. And Jesus had the ability to do what Proverbs talks about, that a wise person does. It says, the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. That a wise person has a way of listening that draws people out deeper and deeper. James, who grew up in the home of Jesus, he was Jesus' little brother. And he writes a book in the Bible called James, and that's our next series. I'm looking forward to that. But he says this, he watched his brother. He said, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Imagine how our world would be different if we started doing this. Because we're really slow to listen to each other, quick to react to each other and get angry, quick to share our opinion, but really slow to listen and to say, I want to understand what it's like to be you first. That would really help things. And the reason that James says you must be quick to listen is because we're not. When the Bible commands something, it's because we're not good at it. We're not natural at it. And even some of you are like, no, I'm a good listener. And I'm saying, well, not so fast. Because it's not easy to listen. Listening is really hard, being a good listener. It's not easy. So what does listening like Jesus look like? What does it mean to receive the deep ball? Well, good listening requires several things. One is concentration. Just like a long pass, you've got to watch that ball all the way in if you're going to catch it. And you've got a lot of distractions. You've got a cornerback probably and a safety and lots of things going on, and there's a lot of distractions, but you've got to watch that all the way in. And as hard as that is, and it's hard, catching the deep ball, listening is even harder. Because we think it takes a lot of communication or a lot of concentration to speak and self-disclose, and it does, but it takes way more concentration to listen at a deep level. In fact, researchers have found that we hear about 20%, in any conversation, we hear about 20% of what the other person says, which means we miss 80% of it, and we kind of fill in the gaps in our minds. And there's a reason for that. That is, we can think a lot faster than we can hear. So we can process information about 5 times faster than the average person talks. So we have lots of room to get distracted by stuff and think about all kinds of things. And it's easy to do. I know for Christy and me, it's way easy because she's, you'll get to decide who you are. She's an external processor. I'm an internal processor. Some of you are external processors. Some of you are internal processors. And if you're an external processor, you don't have to guess what you're thinking because you're saying it. You talk out your thoughts. And Christy's that way. She talks out her thoughts. If she's thinking something, she's probably also saying it because just the way the way she's wired, it helps her to talk things through. Some of you are external processors. So if you're married to an external processor or a friend of an external, some of you are internal processors like me. So there's always something going on in here, even if it doesn't look like it. And there's always this conversation going on in my head with me. Like I'm thinking through stuff. I don't have to say it to think through it. In fact, I wait to say something so let's say we're driving down the road, which is pretty typical, and she's just inches from me, and I'm in my little world, right, internally processing, and she's talking, externally processing, and she's only inches from me, and I can tell there's some noise over there kind of going on, but I'm not keying into it. And I get in trouble when I hear a question like, so what do you think I should do? And I have no idea what she's been talking about. So I have to, what do you do? Well, you fake it, right? And so I was like, oh, well, I think what you already, I think what you said you wanted to do makes a lot of sense. I think I would do that. She's like, well, I didn't say what I was gonna do or thinking about doing. I'm like, your instincts, Kirsty, you got good instinct, just, and of course she can tell, right? I'm like, and you're like, you didn't hear anything. No, not really. And she's learned, right, with me to make sure that she gets my attention first. Like bonks me on the head or say, hey, will you listen to me for a minute? Because otherwise I won't hear anything she's saying. And I've had to learn how to concentrate better. We're practicing on this. And so one thing that's helped me lately, because we're watching a couple movies a month now. We've never really watched movies before. We got this Movie Pass app. So now we're doing this a little bit more. So, and I realized sitting in a movie a couple weeks ago that I'm a really good listener at a movie. Because I eye contact 100%. I don't have my phone out at a movie. And research has shown that even if you're not on your phone, but have your phone in a place where it's kind of visible, like on a table or something, you don't listen nearly as well. So as if you don't have your phone. I put my phone up and I watch the whole movie before I talk. I let it play out 100%. I don't try to interact with them or whatever. I just listen. And so now when I'm with Christy, I try to pretend like I'm at a movie. It's just helping me to, concentrate. It takes that kind of concentration. Good listening also requires restraint. And here I mean our mouth. Proverbs 18:13 says, he who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. It's easy to talk before we've really heard. And because a lot of times when we're listening, we're actually just thinking what we're going to say next. We're not really listening. The Message translation of this is a little bit more to the point. Answering before listening is both stupid and rude. And it is. We do it a lot. And I've had to learn, for example, that when Christy's sharing something like a problem, maybe it's just a physical problem. I shouldn't say just. Maybe it's a physical problem, like she's got a headache or something's aching or something, that she's not really looking for my expert medical advice, such as, why don't you take an Advil? Or, why don't you call a doctor who actually knows about this kind of stuff? That's not what she's wanting, right? She's just wanting me to hear her, to connect with her, to be in it with her, and to know, yeah, I'm with you and for you, and I'm sorry, and let's work this out together. That's all. It's about connection. It's not about fixing her. And so I've had to learn that. It's like what Jack was doing with me and with Kidsley. He was moving into my experience and wanting to know, what's it like? I want to be with you in this. The way some counselors say it, it's people who will get in the well with us. Meaning, let's say we fall into a well, and casual friends will look down from the top of the well and be like, why'd you fall down there? Or, can I throw something down? Can I pray for you? Whatever. But a really comrade, true friend that we're talking about will get down in the well with us. It'll be like, hey, I'm with you in this. What's really going on? How are you really doing? And let's work this out together. I'm with it. I'm with you for the whole thing. Let's figure this out. And that's what he was doing. Good listening also draws people out deeper. And Jesus was so good at that. And really, one way to help us understand that is just good listening takes people from here to here. And just by asking questions that go from here to here. Again, that's what Jack was doing for me. He asked me how I was doing with them moving. I'm talking up here, and he goes here. He's like, well, that's not what I'm asking. I want to know, because if I were you, I'd be really sad. And are you that way? Like, are you kind of grieving right now? And it took me there, and then able to share at that level. And for some of us who are not really good at processing emotion, especially negative emotion, which I'm not, I don't do sad or angry really well. It helps if you just ask somebody, how are you feeling? Be like, good or bad. And so give language to it, like help them. There's a video, Lee Tran, who's our pastor of counseling, if you go on our website, there's a video about what I'm talking about right now. And it's really helpful. Go online and watch it. It's on the front page of the website right now. So I encourage you to do that. But to kind of give hints, to say, like Jack did, to say, hey, if I were you, I'd be sad. Or when you hear about, let's say our kids moving and you're talking to them and say, hey, man, it must be exciting to move to a new place and have a new job. And what's exciting about that? But it must also be kind of scary. Are you anxious about anything? Or, man, if I were going through what you're doing through, I'd be really angry, or I'd be really scared, or I'd really, whatever it is, and just kind of give them an easy, just ask questions that draw them out deeper and deeper. So that's what it means to throw the long ball. And again, like I said at the beginning, this is a gentleman, this is a football kind of a message. And I know some of you are thinking, that guy from Alabama didn't tell me one thing I didn't already know. Well, what about that? Kind of like Vince Lombardi said, hey, if we already knew it, we're already doing this, we'd be a championship team, but we're not. Our relationships would be deeper, but they're not. And so let's actually do this. Let's actually practice this. So again, I want you to choose a relationship. We're going to go to God in prayer because God always promises us when we depend on him to empower what he calls for us to do. He wants us to go deep. And so think about that relationship as we think, okay, how do we throw? God, help me be better at self-disclosing and sharing at a deeper level. And at the same time, God also help me be better about creating an environment where the other group or the other person can actually share at that level. Help me be a better listener, a better receiver. So let's bow our heads and ask for God's help. Father, I do ask for your help. I thank you that you always empower what you ask us to do. And you want us to go deep. You've created us for this. So God, would you help us this week in whatever relationship you put on our mind? God, would you help us be better at self-disclosing, communicating with depth? And would you help that go well? And Father, would you also help us to listen and to draw out the other person and do a better job of creating a safe environment for the other person to be able to self-disclose? Father, we thank you so much for your willingness to help us do and help us gain in our life what you've created us for. In Jesus' name, amen.